Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is Shemaine, and I'm so honored. And I appreciate so much to have my guest, Mark Geist, joining me today. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. So you are a best-selling author of the book 13 Hours, and you were one of the Marines who fought at Benghazi. And you and I also serve on the board for Hunter Nation. We got a lot in common.
Yeah, we do.
So
Yeah.
let's start at the basics. I wanted to get into all of this, and you also have a special program coming up starting tomorrow night, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Tell tell me a little bit briefly about that, and we're gonna circle back and talk more about it.
Well, I was, you know, listening to all the news and seeing everybody out there just kind of getting a little bit stressed out. I thought, let's do something a little bit different and maybe have some entertainment. And I thought, what better way for me to do something that's entertaining, I guess, is, reading my book that I co-authored with the other four surviving members of the Annex security team. So I'm going to have that on my webpage. People can go to it, markgeist.com/live, and subscribe. And every week on Wednesday evening at 8 o'clock Eastern time, I'm going to read a chapter, maybe two chapters of the book, depends on how it goes, and then have a little brief Q&A afterwards. So if people want to know what's going on, they can do that as well.
I love that. That's awesome. So let's get into Benghazi. Let's just jump right in.
Let's do it.
Tell me about it.
Well, I worked for a group called Client Response, or it's GRS, Global Response Teams, or Services. And what we did, what our job was, is to be basically bodyguards for our nation's spies. I worked for the CIA, or I was contracted with the CIA, and I'd been working with them for several years in various places around the world. I'd been contracting since 2004, but ended up in Benghazi about 45 days before September 11th, 2012. And just one of those things that just kind of went bad.
Yeah, it went bad. It went bad fast. How, when you were going through it, I mean, there must have been thoughts where this is overwhelming. How am I going to survive? And then tell us about the stand down orders.
Well, and and now, because I get hit on this a lot, because people are like, well, you didn't hear the stand down order yourself directly. Well, I didn't hear it from Bob, our chief of base, but Tig and Tonto did, and so did Jack, and so did Tyrone Woods. Because I was out in town with a female case officer. We were out on what I'll call a dinner date, and we were meeting with a local Libyan couple, and about halfway through it, around 9:30ish, sometime around there, I got a call that said, hey, from Tyrone Woods, you need to get back to the Annex, and there's something going on at the consulate. He didn't want to go into details because we were on a cell phone, and that's open source, so anybody could be listening in. So I gathered up the female case officer, and I headed back to the Annex. It took us about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to get back, just because we had to go back go up the coast, cut back through some of the desert, and then come back in on the backside, so we didn't have to go through the town, and kind of give us a better route than having to worry about checkpoints and things that might pop up. Mm. Well, while I'm doing that, the rest of the team's getting ready to go over, because what the information they had, I found out when I got back, was that the consulate was under fire, that it had already been overran by about 40 armed insurgents, and their security team for the ambassador was pretty much locked in their safe rooms, and there was no one else to help them.
And so a lot of people, not a lot, but there are a few people who still don't know about the stand down order. Can you describe what happened and how you heard about it?
Well, when I got back, and after the rest of the team got back later that night around midnight, me and Tig, in one of the downtimes, kind of had a chance to talk, and he just kind of expressed that Bob wouldn't let him go. He kept telling him no, that they couldn't go, and kind of what set it off was, and where they decided to disobey that order was when the security team from from the consulate for the ambassador said, if you don't get here now, we're gonna all fucking die. And you could hear the fear in his voice. You could hear the that's the way Tig explained it. You knew what was going to, and I actually heard that over the radio, because once we got in our car and was heading back, I had secure comms in our radio or in our car. And I've heard that. And then at that point they said, Bob, we're not going to listen to you anymore. And they just went over because there was no one else in the area to help.
Now, how do you think things would be different if President Trump would have been president during that time?
I've been asked that a lot, and I guess the best example I can give is what happened when you saw the protests at our embassy in Baghdad. In what was that, around January sometime, I think, is when that all happened. And within 13 minutes, he did more in 13 minutes than Hillary Clinton or Obama did in 13 hours. He had Marines on their way. He didn't care what the country thought. He didn't care what the public appearance, the appearance of it was. The right thing to do is to send people there, reinforce it, and be prepared for whatever might come.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you about writing the book, and then how did that get started? How did you think about writing the book? How did you get involved in it? And then the movie?
Well, and this is part of the story a lot of people don't know about. So how it kind of worked out is I had a friend who I'd been contracting with before, who kind of had a friend who knew Ricky Schroeder from Silver Spoons, from his movie career. And he wanted to do a movie. And he's, Ricky Schroeder is a great patriot. He loves America. He got a hold of me and said, hey, I'd love to do a biography movie about your whole life and to include that. And so we kind of started talking about that. He actually set up a meeting to introduce me to Clint Eastwood. And I got to go meet Clint Eastwood, and he wanted to hear about what happened. And I kind of went through the whole story about what happened. And he asked, have you written a book yet? And I'm like, no. He said, well, if you want a movie made, you got to go write a book. And so I went to go write a book, and I got an agent, started talking about doing the book, because mine, the biography was going to be about my whole life, my faith, my following of Jesus Christ, all of that, as well as Benghazi and everything there. And we had gotten my agent, the first agent I had gotten me a deal over the phone and to write a book. But before I did that, and they actually made me an offer of $1 million as an advance. But before I did that, I went to the rest of the guys and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what's going on. I think the story needs to be told by all of us. And I think we as a team do it. It's going to be more comprehensive. Are you guys interested? And they finally said they were. And through the process, we ended up going with another agent. So I turned down $1 million deal, went and did a deal with these guys. Didn't make as much, but in the long run, I think it was the right thing to do. Again, I probably made maybe a third of what I would have, and probably a quarter of what I would have if I'd have done it by myself. But again, it's kind of the right thing to do is the right thing to do.
That was nice of you to reach out to them, and God bless you for your service and for your sacrifices and everything that you guys went through. I can't even imagine being there. And I mean, are there times now when you think about, you hear a sound and you think about what happened? Do you have flashbacks?
No, I don't, because a lot of people, they talk about, and I call it PTS, not PTSD, because I don't believe it's a disorder. It's just another injury like anything else. It's a brain injury. But, I don't. And I think a lot of that is because of my faith and the relationship, I have with Jesus Christ. A lot of it, I'm not a religious person. I mean, I've seen too many people killed in the name of religion, but I think that one-on-one relationship with the Lord and following through the Bible is what it does it. I mean, Keith Mark, a mutual friend of ours, had told me this. I forgot all about it. And when me and him were together one time, 2 or 3 years ago at a restaurant up in Denver, and he had this lady had recognized me and come up and was kind of talking about Benghazi and this, and she asked me, well, were you afraid? And the words out of my mouth, according to Keith Mark, was, I looked up at her and I said, no, because I'm immortal. And then I paused for a second, and then she just kind of looked at me, and the whole restaurant kind of went quiet. And I said, until God's done with me. And and truly that is the case. I mean, my life on earth is I'm immortal until he calls me home.
Yeah.
And,
oh, I love that. And, there's a lot of fear going on right now. There's a lot of, these are unprecedented times, even biblical. We've never seen anything like this before.
That is true.
What would you say? Let's get into a little bit of the current events and what in your mind is going on right now. What do you believe is happening besides the coronavirus and including the deep state? Are there any ties there?
Well, I think that, and one of my, how do I put this? One of my analogies or possible not solutions, but reasons this happened was, if we remember back, China was dealing with in December, November, December was dealing with protests in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. You had millions of people protesting in Hong Kong every day. They couldn't get control of it. They tried to use their military. They got really a lot of bad publicity because of that. So they were they didn't want to have another Tiananmen Square. They also saw a lot of people in mainland China starting to protest. And I have this is just the opinion of Mark Geist. I don't have anything to back it up, just gut instinct from 30 years of experience in either the military or law enforcement and contracting is, I think they released the virus to potentially stop that. And I mean, what easier way to get 10 million people to stay home? I mean, we've got 330 million people staying home because of the fear of a virus. And it's really kind of quelled that disruption that they had.
It really has. So what do you think, or what do you know, what is your belief about the Q phenomenon?
I haven't looked into a lot of that. It's interesting. There's kind of where, if anybody's ever read the book, and I don't know if this directly relates to the Q phenomenon, but it's written by a couple Chinese generals, and it's called Unrestricted Warfare. Mm. And it talks about how they would use what they were going to do for the future to take over the economy, take over the world economy, and basically put America in its place. Now, they were going to use a virus, but the virus these two generals talk about was more dealing with computers, our infrastructure, our grid, that kind of thing. And if you take away a computer virus, put in the coronavirus, it looks, there's a lot of what they say that makes a lot of sense.
And you also in Colorado were working in investigative capacity for child trafficking.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I got out of the Marine Corps, in '96, I became a deputy sheriff up in Teller County, Colorado. And one of the first jobs that I got was investigating crimes against children and crimes against women, mainly, and crimes against family. But, and the Lord, I think, has blessed me with the ability to, because I'm certified as a forensic interviewer of children. Mm-hmm. The Lord's blessed me with the ability to be able to get kids to talk about stuff they should never have to talk about, that they should never be even having to deal with, but do it in a way to make sure that, and my goal was to make sure they never had to tell that story again in court. So I would make sure I did it right. And there's a certain way to do it. There's a certain pattern of how I do it to get them to bring out unsolicited information. You don't want to lead them. I want them to tell me what happened. And then my background in the Marine Corps, my last 5-6 years in the Marine Corps, I was an interrogator, translator. So that worked well when I got to deal with the suspects. And the majority of the time, if I could get a suspect talking, I almost always got a confession out of him. A lot of times I got more information out of him than what I even knew from the victim. and the,
You
and that
can't
was,
you can't divulge any of the tactics you use, can you?
well, I can say that none of them were, there's a way of doing it where you don't have to worry about violence. You don't have to worry about threats of intimidation. You know, it's a whole different process of messing with the mind.
Ah, I like that. I can't wait to hear more about that, maybe privately.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, so can you talk about the tunnels in Colorado? Do you know anything about that?
Well, you know, and I've read a lot about those tunnels, you know, and, uh, you know, I don't know how much, I don't know a lot about it in depth. I do believe that, I know that there's a lot of people that think they're there. I've never been, me personally, I don't have any direct knowledge of it. You know, I think a lot of that leads also to, um, you know, in Denver airport at DIA, you know, there's, if you look at the way it's mapped out from above, it looks like a satanic symbol is what I've been told. And that there's supposedly tunnels under there, different things like that. You know, and I don't know, maybe I just don't want to believe that the government is that bad that it would do that. But, you know, we see things every day that surprise us from our elected officials, or at least certain parts of our elected officials. And it's always concerning to me that, you know, they're losing direction of we the people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what, we've always said too. And they are elected officials. They work for us. And
Yes.
it's a shame though, because what's happening now is there was so much fighting, and at least now we don't see that anymore. There's no, I've never seen actually our nation get together so well. Nobody's, there's no Antifa. There's no, well, I was going to say there was no talk of impeachment, but now there's another one coming up. But, it's an opportunity for us to kind of, to sit back and go, what's going on? We're not rushing around, running around, going here and there, working away. The commute now is in our home.
Yep. Yeah.
And we're spending more time with our families. We're encouraged to get outdoors and get a little bit of fresh sunshine and fresh air. And for those of us who live off the land and hunt, man, I've never been more proud to be a hunter.
Oh, I know it. You know, it's, you don't have to worry about going to the grocery store.
Oh.
You know, I've got probably close to 200 pounds of venison, either venison or elk in my freezer.
Yeah.
So if I need something, I just go there. The only thing I don't have, because I do live in the city, is I don't have the vegetable garden that I wish that I grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah. We're working on that too. Or fruit trees.
Yeah.
We have fruit trees in Michigan, but not here in Texas. Aren't you in Texas as well?
Colorado.
Colorado still. Okay.
Yeah. My family's lived here since 1918 in Colorado. My grandfather and grandmother, we had 4 milk cows that she milked every day by hand, had a garden that was half the size of a football field. I mean, I grew up on what I think is an idyllic life. I mean, 4,000 or 5,000 acres to run around on. And most of it's plains. It's the high plains. So it's grass. And we raised alfalfa and corn. And I mean, but we raised our own chickens, raised our own beef, raised our own pigs. Never had to go to the grocery store except for like salt and flour and things like that.
And you know what? I think a lot more people are going to want to learn about hunting, because I wasn't raised in a hunting family. It was 31 years ago when I met Ted that I started learning about hunting. And I thought, well, this is healthier for me, not fed up with chemicals and steroids. And you walk out, for us, we walk out the door and we go hunting. We live on hundreds of acres, so we can do that. Not everybody can do that. But I feel like more and more people are going to be interested in learning more about hunting. And that's why you and I have met before for Hunter Nation and trying to support hunters' rights.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, even people that live in the city, it's not but a 30 to 45-minute drive for most people, especially if you're in between the two coasts, to get to some public land where you can hunt.
Yeah.
Don Trump Jr., I mean, a good friend of both of ours, just he goes hunting in New York. He can go hunting, fishing, whatever. It's not that far. You take an hour drive, hour and a half drive, and you can go out and source your own protein. And you know where it's come from. You know what it's been eaten. You know that it's not filled with processed food or chemicals to preserve it or anything like that. I mean, what greater thing can you have than that?
Yeah. You know what I loved about the first time I met Don Trump Jr., I think it was when we had the first Hunter Nation in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, he just was like a regular guy. I'll never forget, he had a Columbia jacket on, he had his hunting boots on, and then he dressed us just like everybody else. He's a regular guy.
Yeah.
And it's really encouraging to see people hunting and talking about hunting and hunters' rights. And, we don't pay other people for our sustenance. We go get it. In my case, because I mostly hunt with a bow and arrow, I get it with a sharp stick.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it's hard. I mean, but I have a friend who is a non-hunter, and she's born and raised in the city, doesn't know anything about hunting. And she said, well, I don't understand. Can't you just walk outside and, get a deer? I go, well, number one, do I just tackle it? And I walked out of our house, and we were on hundreds of acres, and we had this big open field in front of our house. And I was videotaping. I was doing FaceTime Live with her, and I go, do you see one animal anywhere? And I did a slow pan across the whole. She goes, no. Okay, well, I guess that must be hard. So, it's about, I don't mean to diminish that, but it's about educating the public. Now this has changed us so much. We're going to come out of this, I think, more spiritual, relying more on our faith, on God, on each other, and ourselves.
Yeah, and we got to get rid of the hate. The left and the media has gotten us, or the swamp, I should say, has gotten us to hate each other. And it's amazing what happens when you get two people to hate each other. You can get them to do horrendous things to each other. And I think, this virus has made us realize that, that life is precious, that, we do have limited time on this earth, and what we do with that and how we treat one another is so important to how we live our lives and the benefits and the grace that we're given back. And as you said, I mean, every animal that's been on this earth is put here for a purpose, and that purpose is to feed us.
God said it in the Bible.
Exactly. I mean, it's here for us to take advantage of, to eat, to use for clothing, for all the things that we can. And, and we just have to live that life. And I think, like you said, I think more people are going to be aware of that. And, as in the quarantine thing, I mean, what better thing than spend time with our kids.
Yeah.
Rehash. And as I said, I'm making up for lost time because I travel a lot. And before that, I was, when I was contracting and in the military, I was gone. I mean, out of 9 years contract, and I was gone for 7 of it. So I was only home for 3 years out of 9. And, my youngest was only 7 months old when I got injured, but my 2 oldest kids, I missed a lot of their life. And it really makes you stop and think, what's really important. And our family is so important to us, and the relationships that we have with our neighbors and our friends and all of that. And we got to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mark, I love talking with you. I love that you're not afraid to talk about God and your faith, and that you're a hunter and you're a patriot. And thank you so much for your service. Ted and I appreciate everything that you do, and we want to be able to support you. So what is it that you're doing? Tell us again about your weekly fireside chat.
Yeah, it's going to be like a fireside chat. It's going to be a book reading. I'm going to do either and it depends on how long it takes to read a chapter, 1 or 2 chapters every week at the same time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. You can go to markgeist.com/live and subscribe. everybody that subscribes. One of my goals of this is also because I have a nonprofit called Shadow Warriors Project. And what we do is we help the families of those private contractors, private security contractors who get killed and injured overseas. And so I'm not asking for donations, but if people feel compelled to check it out and do that, the one thing I am going to do is the first 1,000 people that sign up for a recurring donation at Shadow Warriors for $19.95 or for $20. I'm going to give them a free autographed book. And, you know, that money that they're going to be donating is going to go to a lot of good families that need help. Because most of these guys are working behind the lines, in the shadows, and their stories can't be told. I mean, my story would have never been told if it hadn't gotten blown up by the politics. Mark Geist would have probably never been, no one would have ever known who I was, or that we'd have lost 4 Americans if it hadn't become the big political football that it did. But I think there was a purpose in that. There was God's purpose in that as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Mark. Hey, if you need some background music during your book reading, I know this guy that plays the guitar.
Oh, yeah? So I think I know him too. You probably know him a little bit better than I do.
Maybe you could Skype him in and he could be playing some background.
There we go. We should try to do that.
I'll talk to him about that.
Yeah, we could get something done. That'd be terrific.
That would be great. All right, Mark, thanks so much for joining me, and have a great day. God bless, and stay safe and healthy.
God bless.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.